Welcome everybody to this evening's Teisho, which is going to come from the Mumonkan Case 2, Hyakujo and a Fox. Most think that the beginning koans in the first book that we use, the Mumonkan, are somehow the easiest, but I think by far some of them are the hardest out of all of the koans that we go through. This is considered to be a Nanto koan, which means one of the most difficult. So even though it's number 2, it still is quite difficult, and from my experience, something that you will unpack for the rest of your life. It is case 2 again, Hyakujo and a Fox, and the koan is as follows. When Master Hyakujo gave Teisho on Zen, an old man sat with the monks to listen and always withdrew when they did. One day, however, he remained behind, and the master asked, "Who are you standing here before me?" The old man replied, "I am not a human being. In the past, in the time of Kasho Buddha, I was the head of this monastery. Once a monk asked me, 'Does an enlightened man also fall into causation or not?' And I replied, 'He does not.' Because of this answer, I was made to live as a fox for 500 lives. Now I beg you, please say the turning word on my behalf and release me from the fox body." The old man then asked Hyakujo, "Does an enlightened man also fall into causation or not?" The master said, "He does not ignore causation." Hearing this, the old man was at once enlightened. Making a bow to Hyakujo, he said, "I have now been released from the fox body, which will be found behind the mountain. I dare to make a request to the master. Please bury it as you would a deceased monk." The master had the Ino strike the gavel and announce to the monks that there would be a funeral for a deceased monk after the midday meal. The monks wondered, saying, "We are all in good health. There is no sick monk in their nirvana hall. What is all this about?" After the meal, the master led the monks to a rock behind the mountain, poked out a dead fox with his staff, and cremated it. In the evening, the master ascended the rostrum in the hall and told the monks the whole story. Obaku thereupon asked, "The old man failed to give the correct turning words and was made to live as a fox for 500 lives, you say. If, however, his answer had not been incorrect each time, what would he have become?" The master said, "Come closer and I'll tell you." Obaku then stepped forward to Hyakujo and slapped him. The master laughed out loud, clapping his hands, and said, "I thought the foreigner's beard is red, but I see that it is a foreigner with a red beard." Mumon's commentary: not falling into causation, why was he turned into a fox body? Not ignoring causation, why was he released from the fox body? If you have an eye to see through this, then you will know that the former head of the monastery did enjoy his 500 happy, blessed lives as a fox. Mumon's poem: not falling, not ignoring, odd and even are on one die. Not ignoring, not falling, hundreds and thousands of regrets. So as I said, this is a Nanto koan, a very difficult koan, and with my students, this one takes quite a while, and it can be quite frustrating. And there's many times in it where I see people balk and really kind of think, is this practice really for me? Because it really is demanding that we expose all of ourselves. All of the things that we hide, all of the shadows that are within us, all of our beliefs and disbeliefs, and really look at them in an honest way, really put them into the light. Now this is Hyakujo Akai, not Hyakujo Nihan, which we talked about last time in case 28 in the Hikigan Roku. And as I said before, and I won't go into it again since I did the last Dharma talk, Hyakujo was actually the name of the mountain and the temple in which Hyakujo, the abbot, resided at. It was very traditional back then to name the abbot after the mountain, and of course the temple was also named after the mountain. So this is why these are two Hyakujos. And actually, in this case, we have three Hyakujos, which is very, very interesting. It's interesting because he says that the old man always shows up for his taste shows, but it's kind of always in the back, kind of always a little obscured, always in the periphery, you know. So he doesn't say like he's in the front or you know, in the middle of the audience, but kind of in the back, right? So it just kind of gets a glimpse from him every time, and then he just kind of disappears and is gone. So he says, you know, who are you standing before me? Wow, what a question. You know, if we ask ourselves that same thing, you know, who are we? You know, and he is asking a question which is interesting too, because in Zen circle it has many different uses. You know, who are you? You know, or who is it who stands before me? It's an inquiry. One of the most interesting things about the human condition that I have found, and one of the reasons why I love psychology so much, is the human condition is so dynamic. There's so many different aspects of ourselves, many that we don't know are there. Many times we do things and don't even know why we do them. Many times we kind of look around and think that the cause of something is because of somebody else or something external, without realizing that maybe the cause is us. And these various personas that we have within us, one example is the child within. Back in the 80s, it was a really big thing, the child within, and about letting the child within out. It was kind of an acknowledgement of all the different sub-selves, or all the different aspects that kind of coalesce to become what we call our fluid self. So each of them affecting kind of the fluid self that's presented to the forefront. And this child within was kind of an acknowledgement that in each of us, no matter if we had childhood trauma or not, that there was almost always misunderstanding that we carried around with us. Because no matter what, as a child, your understanding of the world is very minimal. And it's very easy as a child to misunderstand things. An example of this, and it's kind of this is a cute example, is I would tell my daughter that the brewery that was next to our house had this huge smokestack, and there was always this steam, of course, coming out of the smokestack. And I would tell her that it was a cloud factory. And she believed me for many, many, many years, until she figured it out. And then she was like almost a little angry, but almost a little disappointed too, because she really did believe it. And again, this is because even now, as adults, we see so very little of karma or cause and effect that it is very easy to misunderstand. And in here we're talking about causation. And causation is really karma or cause and effect. In Zen practice, we have the idea of karma in the sense of strictly cause and effect. In the Vedic traditions, the idea of karma has to do with a vessel or an entity called Atta or Atman, whatever you want to call it, that kind of is endless, and it goes from one form to another form to another form, and along its passage it picks up karma, both good and bad karma. And depending on your karma, you'll be reborn into a certain realm. So it's almost kind of like a merit-demerit type system. I remember as a child, I grew up in a Lutheran household, which was very close to Catholicism. If you know anything about the Lutheran faith, every church is different, but this was, of course, years and years ago, and it tended to be very traditional and very black and white and very right and wrong and very heaven and hell and very God and devil, and if you do the wrong thing, you're going to be punished. If you do the right thing, you're going to be rewarded. So this is kind of how I perceive things, very much so. I was very careful. You know, I said my prayers before I went to sleep, you know, just in case. And I remember one time, my best friend, his name was Mike McCaslin, still remember him very much, still very fond of him. And Mike and I had a fight, a tiff, and we were very, very close. We did everything together. And I remember that night, I wished such bad things for him because I was so mad at him because we were so close when we fought. We really fought, and it hurt, and it made us raw. And I remember thinking, you know, I wish he gets beat up, or I wish something would happen to him, you know, bad. I just wish he would, you know, go away. And the next day he actually got into a car accident. And I really felt truly and deeply that I had caused it. I thought that because I had wished it and was so, you know, intent and with so much volition behind it that I actually had caused it. And it caused me a great deal of suffering for many, many years. Every once in a while, I too would catch, you know, this entity in the periphery and feel, you know, this overwhelming sadness as though I had done something wrong. And still to this day, even though it has taken me, you know, many years to kind of sift through childhood trauma and such forth like that, I still, every once in a while, catch that little boy in the periphery that still is sorry for what he did and is still worried that he's going to be punished. It's just, with work, those personas begin to kind of smooth out a little bit. So we're very kind of right and wrong in our beliefs many times, that we either have done something right or we've done something wrong, or we've said something right or we said something wrong. And it's something that we don't work on. As I always give the disclaimer, just because we have insight into a koan does not mean we pass it, especially with this one. This is definitely an ongoing, lifelong process. Because well after I did this, years after I did this koan, when I started first practicing with Genjo Roshi, he had asked me to coordinate painting the hallways in the new temple that was purchased. And I remember I was so worried that I was going to do something wrong, that I wasn't going to impress him and he was going to be angry, that even though I meticulously did everything and taped everything and we went to the store together and got the right amount of everything, I still asked him, is this right? Is this what you wanted? And he looked at me and he said, oh, there's no right and there's no wrong way. And I thought to myself of this koan, like, here I am how many years later, and I'm still caught. And he reminded me of, you know, being caught in right and wrong. And people get caught in this way very often, you know, besides the child that kind of misunderstands and only sees a very tiny bit. Even as adults, we see only a tiny bit, like that iceberg, you know, we see the tip of it, but we don't see kind of the base of it. The other day I was speaking at the Quaker church and somebody asked me about more tantric traditions like Vajrayana, and was saying, you know, that they were doing various hand mudras and various tantric practices, and she said they helped still her, and she kind of very much resonated with them. And how was Zen in comparison to that? And I said, well, Zen really tries to strip away as much as possible. And we don't really engage in as much esoteric practices or tantric practices, but we definitely still do have them. And I follow that up by saying, this does not mean, though, that one is right and one is wrong, or one is better than the other. It just means that they're different. So don't misunderstand that just because we don't do a lot of these, esoteric practices does not mean that they're not powerful and as valid as any other thing within Zen. The Buddha in the Lotus Sutra had talked about the various vehicles that were pulling up in front of the burning house. And he said, there was 3 vehicles because not one vehicle was going to get the attention of everybody within the house. So he created 3 vehicles, and each vehicle attracted a certain amount of people, and each one was a little different. So this is the same way with Zen practice, and pretty much the same way in life. There's no right way, there's no wrong way, there just is one way. But not maybe one way in the way that you think. So we have a lot of misunderstanding in us, and we have a lot of different personas that kind of occupy the same space, and it's not that they're separate from our main self, or our fluid self, if you will. It's just that they're kind of walled off, and a lot of times if there's painful memories or something that we find unacceptable, we kind of wall them off, almost like the body does to a bacteria or a virus to protect itself. So we kind of hide it, we put it in the periphery, where it's not seen a lot, and we try not to pay attention to it. The problem is, these aspects of ourself are still part of us. And yes, the more that we mature, the more that a lot of these personas kind of become more integrated in our fluid self. But there's also elements that will always be part of us. One of the elements, and it's found in all of human beings, is kind of this invincible self, this Zen master of the universe type mentality, or you could also call it the one that wears the spiritual armor that's impenetrable. They can make no mistakes, and they operate at a totally different level than everybody else. So it's not that they've done anything wrong, it's just that they've been misunderstood by other people when they've caused harm, that it was a lesson and you just didn't get it. And unfortunately, there is quite a bit of that has gone on in the past and is going on, and that behavior, especially when it comes to Zen teachers, can lead to an awful lot of suffering and trauma and messes. I know a Zen teacher who I loved and adored and looked up to, and if it wasn't for him, I would have never been exposed to Rinzai Zen practice. And he was brilliant, and his teshos were just inspiring, and just interacting with him, and of course a lot of it is projection, but just interacting with him sometimes was just amazing. Like, he glowed. I remember the one time I was just literally dry mopping the hallway floor, and I was just had the mop straight and was just going up and down the hallway, and he came up to me, he's like, no, and he grabbed the mop and he put it at an angle so the corner was hitting the molding in the hallway, and then he pushed it kind of at an angle to show me that most of the dirt is on the corners of the hallway next to the molding, not in the main hallway, so you really should be focusing on the edges versus just the middle. And it was what it was. It literally was one man showing another man how to properly, remove dirt from the floor. But to me, it was amazing because he was so powerful. But yet, with that being said, too, there was aspects of him that he could not see, that were not in focus. And he caused an awful lot of suffering around him. And he was so inspiring and he did so much good, but yet, you know, every once in a while, these personas, these damaged, fragmented personalities that come forth would come out of him, and he probably very much unknowingly would harm people around him. And I say unknowingly, not that maybe he didn't consciously know that he was doing it, but unknowingly because I don't think he ever really investigated it. And that's really what this koan is about being very brutally honest and raw and investigating, right? So we do have that Zen master within us, but we also have this damaged aspect of ourselves that misunderstands, that, you know, that is caught in a certain repetitive behavior. They say, you know, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. So in a way, we all have this insanity. We all exhibit these behaviors and let these personas come out to the forefront and create chaos. And you know, and then we're like, well, what happened? I don't understand. Or it's your fault, or it's your fault, or it's, oh, it's because of this, without ever looking and seeing that it's actually was all us. That we're the ones that are responsible for it. And that takes quite some time, and it's different for everybody. And again, it's not something that we ever arrive at. We don't ever get to the point where, you know, these personas don't jump out every once in a while. They do, but we begin to kind of expose them more and more to the light by investigating them and being honest with ourselves. And in doing so, a lot of the misunderstanding and a lot of the pain and a lot of the grasping that's occurring begins to lessen more and more. It's not that these aspects, you know, these personas that cause damage ever leave us. They don't. But they become more integrated in the greater self and more fluid. So they no longer kind of jump out unexpectedly and, you know, create a mess around us. We've kind of looked into them, we've recognized them, we've understood them a little bit, we've worked them out, and we're very aware of them, right? And that's one of the key things, is being very aware of these aspects of ourselves. And making sure that we're watching. And in AA they talk about taking inventory, that we're kind of inventorying what's going on here and why. Very important, right? But yet, again, you know, are we as I was as a child, and we're walking on eggshells because we don't want merit or demerit, or we don't want to anger God, you know, we want to please Him, we want to do the right thing and not the wrong thing because we don't, you know, want to be punished. You know, what is that dynamic between the two is very important. And we must do the work, we must do the work. And one of the things that I do most with this koan is something that I phrased as Zen dialectics. And dialectics kind of has a more obscure meaning in psychology now, but really it's an internal dialogue between these different parts of ourselves in which we kind of explore them and flesh them out and look into the motivation and how they affect us, and what we can do to be aware and conscious in our daily lives of this aspect of ourselves. So when it comes out, or when we start to feel it come out, that we kind of, you know, recognize it and know how to handle it, almost as I always, you know, tell people that work with early childhood trauma that, you know, when they are exploring that persona, The other persona, or the father type persona, the father persona is allowing the child persona, or the child within, to express pain and express suffering, and is non-judgmental and is embracing of that child and accepting of that child. Again, allowing those voices to come out and seeing what they're saying and why they're saying it, and what they are, and to help expose them to the light more and more, or the broader picture, so that they don't catch us off guard, and we have more insight into them. So people balk many times when it comes to this actual practice of looking into these various selves, because some of them we don't want to look into, especially the ones that cause a mess around us. We do not want to see into them at all. We want to look into, the Zen master within us, and we can look into everything else. But those aspects of ourselves that cause a mess of things, or get caught, we don't want to look at those. So we ignore them, and it always kind of catches up to us at some time. So I had said about looking at all these different aspects of ourselves, and all of these, misunderstandings that, they may hold or we may hold, and, kind of looking at them from a more universal perspective, a more open perspective, to see the motivation and to see the truth of the matter, and how we can help to resolve or to wear away the barriers that we have built around them. And the more our practice matures, the more we begin to, really honestly look at ourselves and take responsibility for all the aspects of ourselves. And again, it's not that these personas don't jump out, every once in a while. They do. But recognizing them is extremely important in understanding when they come out, why they come out, and what they are, and where they come from. So as practice begins to mature, and as we become more humble, and as we become more honest, these behaviors, these personas that manifest these behaviors, have less and less usurping control of us. So we kind of maintain, if you will, the fluid consciousness with the awareness that within us is, a whole bunch of subcells, if you will, or fragmented aspects of ourselves. Some powerful and good, if you will, and then some quite damaged and destructive. So maturity of practice is important, and we go from Joshu's Mu, which is about, the absolute, and, everything is Mu and nothing escapes Mu, to a koan that's talking now about maturity of this. What is the maturity of this? Do we go around with that spiritual impenetrable armor on, or do we go around with that, Roshi persona that, we're operating on a different level than everybody else, and if we hurt somebody or hurt ourselves, people just misunderstand, because these are lessons that we're teaching them. And they may be lessons, but to whether we're teaching them is really in doubt and in question when it comes to the aspects of this koan. So I always had a hard time too. I was always told, when the robe goes on, then you put your monk face on. And I'm like, well, why am I putting my monk face on? Just because I'm putting my robes on. Shouldn't I have that face on pretty much all the time, no matter what I'm doing, no matter, what aspect of myself I'm presenting, whether it's lounging at home in sweats and my favorite ripped up t-shirt, or, in gold brocade robes. Why should there be any difference between how I act? But there is, and again, this has to do with kind of these different aspects and these different part of ourselves that we present in different situations, some positive and then some extremely negative and damaging. Extremely negative and damaging, right? So, it says that the master had the Ino strike the gavel and announce to the monks that there would be a funeral for a deceased monk after the midday meal. The monks wondering, saying, you know, we are all in good health, there's no sick monk in the Nirvana Hall, which of course is where monks would go when they're sick. What is all this about, right? It says at the end of the meal, the master led the monks to the rock behind the mountains, poked out a fox with his staff, and cremated it. So it's very important, as I talked about before, exploring these aspects of ourselves, exploring these personalities or these various fragments of self within us, and resolving the ones that are damaging, not ignoring the chaos that they're causing, is really vitally important. And when we do that, when we do the work, when our self becomes fluid, if you will, or our consciousness becomes fluid, all of those other aspects or damaging aspects of ourselves kind of are reabsorbed into that consciousness, right? So they're not walled off anymore, and they're not usurping a whole bunch of power and jumping out of nowhere anymore. There's more of a consistent flow of consciousness and self-awareness. These things may come to mind and we may recognize them, and just like everything else, then we may let go of them. But after we go through this process, these damaging parts of ourselves many times are depleted because we're recognizing them and we're working on them and we're shining a light on them and giving them a voice. So they dissipate, right? They dissipate. Almost as though, you know, they were, vanishing, or almost as though they were nothing but ash, just very subtle remnants of what they were, almost as such. So at the end of the koan, which is kind of the core of it, and if we've followed along through the koan and we've gone through the various aspects of it, and I mean really gone through it and experienced it, and we get to the tail end of the koan, which actually is kind of a culmination or a demonstration of really what the heart of the koan is all about. And it says, in the evening the master ascended the rostrum in the hall and told the monks the whole story. So, this whole story about, this monk that was behind, and he gave them a turning word, and all of a sudden he, became a human being again. And not this illusory, tricky fox, but an actual human being. And then Obaku says, and of course Obaku sees right through everything, which makes the end very comical. Obaku thereupon asks, he says, well, the old man failed to give the correct turning words and was made to live as a fox for 500 lives, you say. If, however, his answers had not been incorrect each time, what would he have become? Right? So a very valid question, and if we didn't get the preceding points of the koan, we may miss it and become very confused here. But again, if we did get them and we did our work, we kind of have a chuckle along with Obaku. And the master says, well, come a little closer and I'll tell you the answer, tell you the right answer. So Obaku steps forward and then Hyakujo slaps him, you know, and in such a demonstration, you know, the master laughed out loud, clapping his hands, and he says, you know, I thought a foreigner's beard is red, but I see that there is a foreigner with a red beard, right? So acknowledgement that has seen through the koan. And this is a very, very important koan. I can't stress that enough. I mean, all of them really are, but some more so than others. And this one more so because if we really don't understand, we can really get caught by aspects of ourselves. Or we could get caught in misunderstanding of the world around us. And somehow, you know, get caught in this cycle over and over and over and over again until we kind of look at it very honestly and openly and escape the dualistic confines that kind of constrict us and create those walled off aspects of energy within ourselves. So, a great koan to work on, and hopefully those that are working on it now remain diligent with it, and those of you that have worked on it, I'm sure that you continue to work on it. So thank you for joining me this evening for tonight's taste show, and have a good rest of the week. Thank you.